I'm Bob Neill, and I'm the Shadow Minister for Local Government. We have already raised this on a number of occasions in Parliament. I've found so far that the responses I've had from ministers have not been satisfactory, and we will certainly be looking to raise further opportunities to get this on the agenda in the Commons before the Christmas recess, because this needs to be dealt with urgently. So as I understand it, the rates bills, which are going to cripple some of these firms, are going to be hitting the deck in January. So we've got to get movement before Christmas, and we will certainly be returning to it in the Commons, yes.
Do you have an alternative proposal at this stage?
Well, what we want to do, I'm told that the businesses themselves have come up with a sensible alternative, and if there's a viable alternative, if the government was willing to listen, we as an opposition will be prepared to give that a fair wind and ease their route in doing that. And I think the second point that we want to say is to the government, well, it is extraordinary that they've created what's in effect a retrospective tax. There's no way of dressing it up. And they've done it without any impact assessment. And that is fundamentally wrong. It seems to be going against their own normal procedures. So they've really got to stand back and think again. And we will assist them in any way, because this does affect businesses at a time of recession. It's the sort of area where we are prepared to collaborate to see if there's a solution for people. It's up to them to seize that and make the initiative.
And in terms of that alternative, what have they been saying to you?
Well, what the businesses have been saying is that there is apparently a procedure whereby rates can be prescribed, and that could perhaps be dealt with at manageable levels for people. And I think that's the key thing that we've got to do. As I understand it, these businesses are not saying that we don't expect to have some increase in our rates, but what they are finding is that the increase is totally out of all proportion to what's affordable. And also there's this backdated whammy which has come up on them by stealth. And when you've got a situation where you have like 1,700% increases that have been given to me by one business, another situation where a business is going to be facing a rates bill which is more than its turnover, and that's going to send these people insolvent. And that just cannot be right.
Do you feel there's any difference between the very big businesses that use the docks and the smaller guys who, obviously, that they've got a problem at the moment, but there are some people who say, look, the big businesses should pay more business rates on the docks?
Well, again, the sense I've got from both the big and the small businesses is that nobody objects to paying a fair rate. But the way this has been handled has proved to be hugely unfair. And I think the concerns I've got are twofold. Firstly, then, obviously the most immediate pressure is upon the small and medium-sized businesses. Not least because the way the rules are, they are going to have to bring the whole of that debt into this year's accounts. And now it's been stressed to the government, and the government just doesn't seem to understand that point. And it doesn't matter if you give them time to pay or not. If they've got to put on a massive debt onto this year's accounts, in some cases that will send them insolvent, and they cannot trade. So that's a real immediate problem. But I think there's also an issue for the bigger businesses. I mean, take DFS and something. They've invested huge amounts of money, about £200 million, I think, something like that. Many jobs here. But these big firms, they work in an international world. They can go elsewhere. And if ultimately there are these really penal rates placed upon firms, both big and small, will move. The small guys will go under, and the big guys will find it's more convenient to go and operate in Zeebrugge or Rotterdam or wherever, and then ship the stuff in by road. Now that's a nonsense. It flies against all government policy, flies against the policy of promoting business, it flies against using the ports, and it's scarcely helping to reduce carbon footprints. It's the worst of all worlds we're in potential risk of getting.
You said a few moments ago you're going to put pressure on the government. A little bit more detail. What do you aim to do after this meeting?
Well, what I'm going to do, first of all, I'm taking this directly back to David Cameron and George Osborne, who are really appraised of the situation. We've got the debate on the Queen's speech, which goes on for a number of days, and so we'll be aiming to raise that in the course of the debate on the Queen's speech, and I shall certainly also be tabling further questions to ministers, and I know a number of members of Parliament of all parties are anxious, at the very least, to have a debate in, let's say, Westminster Hall or in the German debate, also to raise the issue. So there's a number of avenues that we're going to pursue.
Finally, imagine that you do win the next election. What would happen? What have you been able to say to the chaps here today in terms of what would happen under Conservative government?
What I have said is, of course, we want to put together a whole raft of measures which are going to make life easier for businesses, and that's why I'm going to be talking to George Osborne's team about this. And obviously we'll then be able to, once we know where we are financially, we will be able to know what the situation is and what we need to meet. But the real problem that we face is that, although I very much hope that we'll be in a position to change things when we come into government, for some of these firms that may be too late, and they need action now.